Ladies and gentlemen, welcome everybody. Hello, I'm Georgina Godwin. I'm host of the proceedings tonight and also of Read Smart, the official podcast for the Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction. As you know, the Baillie Gifford Prize rewards excellence in non-fiction writing, bringing the best in intelligent reflection on the world to new readers. The prize has been running since 1999, and it celebrated its 25th anniversary in 2023. I was lucky enough to judge it in 2022, and I know how much work this panel put in. It covers all non-fiction in the areas of current affairs, history, politics, science, sport, travel, biography, autobiography, and the arts. We believe that the best stories are true. Tonight's dinner, as well as the Read Smart podcast, are generously sponsored by the Blavatnik Family Foundation, and we are very grateful. I'd like to introduce the chair of the judges, Isabel Hilton, and one member of her excellent panel, Tomiwa Owolade. I know everybody's very anxious to find out who has won, so we're going to have a very brief chat now, and then we'll play a video of each book, about each book with each author, and then we'll invite the authors or their representatives, because sadly a few of them are not actually in the room tonight, to come up and accept our congratulations and an envelope. So, first of all, really, I suppose it's about the judging process, Isabel. I mean, how do you possibly whittle it down? What do you start with, and how do you get to the eventual winner?
Well, you start with a rather terrifying room full of books, which we sort of roam through like sort of beasts in the jungle, really. If a book was selected by 3 judges at that point, they had to go away and read it. So there were a lot of books that were in play. There was a lot of anxiety that somehow the right book wasn't in the room, so we called in a few. So you worry about missing a work of genius, you worry about all sorts of things. And then at every iteration, you have to say goodbye to something that you may be very fond of, something you know that has really spoken to you. But I have to say that it was grueling in some ways, particularly in the first phases of reading when you're reading in bulk. But as a group of judges, I couldn't have had a better experience. We're all still on very good terms.
Just about.
Just about. No tales out of school.
Tom, for you, I wonder how it informed your knowledge and your experience of the non-fiction landscape.
I think it informed my knowledge of certain trends, because I think one of the striking things about the books that we chose is that certain trends emerged from it, and this was not a kind of conscious decision on our part. It just emerged from what we considered to be the best non-fiction books of the year. So amongst many of the books, you still notice the legacy of the Second World War. That's a theme, either through the fight for independence in Indonesia or the legacy of nuclear war. I think another theme which runs through the books is the fragility of life. So much is at stake in every single one of the books that we chose for our shortlist, and I think that fragility, that sense that that kind of existential tension that runs throughout the books, that's one of the other themes that we identified after choosing them.
I mean, you have come to this very difficult decision. You've done a lot of work on it. But there are bound to be authors in the audience or authors watching this who want to know what they should do if they want to be in with a chance of winning this prize.
Well, I think the basic thing is write a brilliant book. I mean, we have 6 brilliant books on our shortlist, and they all have a sort of magical, compelling quality. They're all extraordinarily well written. They're telling extraordinarily powerful stories, very well. So that's simple, isn't it? That's just 3 things you need to do.
Let's meet them. So let's begin with The Story of a Heart by Rachel Clarke.
No other part of the human body comes close to matching the metaphorical richness of the human heart. Hearts sing, soar, race, burn, break, bleed, swell, hammer, and melt. They can be won or lost, cut or trampled, and hewn from oak or stone or gold. They have a temperature, warm or cold, and can be squeezed, can sink, or be thrown away. Their vessels filled not only with blood, but with our sorrows, hopes, and fears. Such is the organ's centrality to the English language that the Oxford English Dictionary definition of the word heart runs to a staggering 15,000 words. The Story of a Heart is the tale of one particular human heart, that of a little girl, Kira, who saved the life of a little boy, Max, when her heart was transplanted into his body. Every successful heart transplant is a nail-biting, literally death-defying race against the odds. And it's built on this incredible, rich history of medical innovation, maverick surgeons, sort of supersized egos, incredible rivalries. I hope that readers will come away part dazzled by the medicine of how this pump does its all-important job, but also captivated by the very human story, the very heartfelt story of how human beings, when plunged into the most difficult, darkest, challenging circumstances anyone can face, find it within themselves to rise to the challenge and actually embody all of those qualities that we associate with the heart.
It's told so carefully through the story of the little girl and her family and the decision they come to make about donating her organs, and then the story of this little boy and how his health starts to fail and how he is there waiting for a heart. So it is tender and moving. I was reading it on the tube and with my daughter next to me, and I just started weeping. It's absolutely heartbreaking, absolutely brilliant, but it also is hopeful because it's these people speaking to the altruism of people who will donate their organs and the difference that they make. So it's absolutely brilliant book.
Yeah, having an emotional impact on you.
Yes.
We're going to have Rachel up in a minute to appreciate your applause.
I think every one of us was emotionally moved by it. Rachel Clarke comes from a medical background, and of course there's a lot of medicine and science and biology in the book, but I think the most striking thing from the perspective of me and the other judges was that it's such a great moving story. It felt like reading a great novel. It's not just the fact that it was so moving, but it was so gripping as well to read. So yeah, it's a wonderful book.
Rachel Clarke. Thank you very much indeed. Right now, we're going to go on to question 7, and this one by the Australian writer, Richard Flanagan.
Without Rebecca West-Kiss, H.G. Wells would not have run off to Switzerland to write a book in which everything burns. And without H.G. Wells' book, Leo Szilard would never have conceived of a nuclear chain reaction. And without conceiving of a nuclear chain reaction, he would never have grown terrified. And without growing terrified, Leo Szilard would never have persuaded Einstein to lobby Roosevelt. And without Einstein lobbying Roosevelt, there would have been no Manhattan Project. And without the Manhattan Project, there is no lever at 8:15 a.m. on 6 August 1945 for Thomas Ferriby to release 31,000 feet over Hiroshima. There is no bomb on Hiroshima, and there is no bomb on Nagasaki, and 100,000 people or 160,000 people or 200,000 people live and my father dies. Poetry may make nothing happen, but a novel destroyed Hiroshima, and without Hiroshima there is no me, and these words erase themselves and me with them. I came to realise that we're living in a strange autumn of things, and a world I'd taken for granted was now vanishing. Birds, animals, fishes, so much that I thought was there forever was disappearing all around me. And at the same time, I realised that the question that consumes us all is, why do we live? How to live? How do we find meaning in a universe that too often feels meaningless? In the time you're writing a book, you think you're unravelling the answers to, all these great questions that perplex you, and you think you become close to the mystery at the heart of things. And then when you finish the book, you realise you actually understand absolutely nothing at all.
Question 7 is a phenomenal piece of artistry. It's bringing in this really vast array of subjects that you wouldn't automatically put together. There's the dropping of the atomic bombs in Japan. There's the Tasmanian genocide. There's H.G. Wells and the War of the World. All this manner of subjects that are all brought together in a sort of family memoir. I think ultimately it's about the value of life and love. I kept thinking about it after I'd read it. It really sunk in, and I just think it's an incredible piece of literature.
I mean, so much in that book, but what for you, Isabel, did you appreciate most?
Richard Flanagan lays out there a chain of consequences in a rather sort of linear fashion, but that's not what the book does. It's much more intricately constructed in the book. And when he says that, at the end of it, you understand that you understand nothing at all, I think he does himself a bit of a disservice, because for the reader, it's that thing about apprehending something by not looking directly at it. You may not be able to name it, but it stays with you. It is an extraordinarily beautifully constructed, beautifully written book with a set of causes and effects interwoven with a very intimate personal story, his parents, his father's experience, the meaning of love. I mean, it is just a masterpiece in its construction and its execution.
Well, Rich is at home in Tasmania, but his publisher, Clarke is here. If we could ask Clara to come up. Thank you. Staying with nuclear war, it is nuclear war, a scenario, and this is by Annie Jacobsen.
A 1 megaton thermonuclear weapon detonation begins with a flash of light and heat so tremendous it is impossible for the human mind to comprehend. 180 million degrees Fahrenheit is 4 or 5 times hotter than the temperature that occurs at the center of the Earth's sun. In the first fraction of a millisecond after this thermonuclear bomb strikes the Pentagon outside Washington, D.C., there is light. Soft X-ray light with a very short wavelength. The light superheats the surrounding air to millions of degrees, creating a massive fireball that expands at millions of miles per hour. Within a few seconds, this fireball increases to a diameter of a little more than a mile, its light and heat so intense that concrete surfaces explode, metal objects melt or evaporate, stone shatters, humans instantaneously convert into combusting carbon. I'm the author of 6 previous books about war and weapons and national security and secrets. And so many of my sources have said to me that the reason they did what they did was to prevent nuclear World War III. I began to wonder what happens if prevention fails, what happens if deterrence fails. And so I wrote Nuclear War to demonstrate to readers in appalling detail just how horrific nuclear war would be.
Because, you know, nuclear war is surrounded by lies, deceit, illusions, systems which are meant to be foolproof. And Annie Jacobsen takes us into this world in the most extraordinary way. It's the most extraordinary bit of journalism. She tells you things that you really didn't know. You may never sleep again, but this is an utterly compelling book about one of the biggest topics you could ever tackle.
I mean, Tom, a hugely impactful book. Yeah. What did it mean to you?
Yeah, I think Isabel is correct in saying this is an extraordinary piece of journalism, and I think many of us might take the sort of possibility of nuclear warfare as something that is completely unlikely to happen, and just this reminds us of what that scenario would look like. I think all of us were struck by the number of interviews that Annie Jacobsen was able to get. The level of access was absolutely extraordinary, and reading the book as well was just such a thrilling experience. Even though it's the most bleak subject conceivable, it's nevertheless such a thrilling read, and I think those qualities is the reason why it's on our shortlist.
Annie Jacobsen. Thank you, well done. We come next to A Man with Two Faces, and this is by Viet, Thanh, Nguyen.
I lean close to tell Matt in Vietnamese that I love her. She lived a good life, a life of hard work and sacrifice, a heroic life, a life that demanded so much strength, devotion, and love. I don't know where Matt found those qualities, but I am the beneficiary. These words, this faith in her, this betrayal of her, are the outcome. Mad's eyes do not open. She gives no sign of hearing. Her breathing finally stops. It is midnight. Her journey on this earth complete. My mother is mine, and my mother is also other to me. My brother makes a phone call. In an hour, a courteous stranger who might be Filipino arrives with a gurney, fills out a form, takes away my mother, leaves the empty hospital bed in the family room, and drives my mother into the night. I remember, Nah loved me. Everything else, I can forget. A Man of Two Faces is a memoir, a history, and a memorial. It's about my mother and my father, who were refugees from Vietnam, and I'm a refugee from Vietnam, and it's taken me most of my life to try to deal with the emotional consequences of being a refugee, of fleeing from war, and of seeing what those experiences did to my mother, my father, and myself, as well as to the country of the United States.
He's a writer entirely unafraid to go where the pain is. This is a book that strikes to the heart of what hurts, what has hurt him. And there's a kind of irresolvable nature to this memoir that I love. There's no healing, there's no easy answers. It's just about interrogation. It's filled with heart and it's filled with humor, and it's a book by a writer at the absolute top of his game.
Isabel, why for you did that book deserve a place on your shortlist?
For all the reasons that you've seen, but also I think all of our books speak to our moment now, and you know, the experience of migration, the way the past imprints itself down the generations, how you discover and become who you are. And although, I mean, yes, it's tragic in many ways, it's also quite witty, it's quite funny and in parts, and it's utterly charming, again, beautifully written, and just devastatingly honest in ways that I think we all felt was unforgettable.
Sadly, Viet, another one who's not able to join us tonight, but he is represented this evening by James Galbert. On we go, and next it's Wild Thing by Sue Prideaux.
Gauguin continued to love and respect Vincent, to write to him and about him with deep affection, but he could not bear to see him ever again. Gauguin repulsed all Vincent's eager suggestions that they resume the artistic struggle together, painting side by side. But in his refusals, Gauguin was consistently careful in fending him off considerately to preserve his fragile feelings and self-respect. Gauguin saw through the smell and the mess and the impractical fanaticism to a luminous spirit whose ecstasies were Vincent's way, not Gauguin's way, but for Vincent the only sure road to comprehension. Many years later, when Vincent was long dead, and Gauguin was living in Polynesia, he sent to France for sunflower seeds. He planted them, tended them carefully, brought them to flower, and then he painted them, stuffed into a vase and sitting on a chair. In memory, he wrote, of my gentle friend, Vincent. So it's the first biography of Paul Gauguin for 30 years. And what inspired me was in 2019, there was an exhibition at the National Gallery in which caused the most tremendous fuss. People were saying that Gauguin was a paedophile who spread syphilis throughout the South Seas. He should be cancelled and his paintings should be burnt. Well, I'd just come out of writing a biography of Nietzsche, and I couldn't really take the easy road and just say I love the art and hate the man. So I started investigating. His most important manuscript is called Avant et Après. It's 200 handwritten pages and is basically Gauguin's autobiography. It had been lost for 100 years, resurfaced in 2021. The Quarto gave me full access to it, which was an amazing resource. So there's a lot of new material. Well, I hope what readers will take away from this book is that, well, in this age of fake news and conspiracy theories, it seems to me more important than ever that writers should discover the truth and then write it.
Gauguin himself had a, well, Wild Thing, the title's the clue, like, had a wild life. You know, he starts off in revolutionary Paris, his family move when he's young to Peru, becomes friends later with Van Gogh, he helps dig the Panama Canal. He's a controversial character. What this book does, and Prideaux does so well, is it takes new material that recontextualise him. So in recent years, Gauguin has more or less not quite been cancelled, but we look askance at him going to Polynesia, his relationship obviously with a teenage girl. Prideaux doesn't apologise for him, she certainly doesn't do that, but she allows him to be complex. It tackles bigger subjects even than Gauguin. It tackles colonialism, it tackles our own view of history, and it tackles our own presumptions and preoccupations today and how we impose those on the past.
Tom, did this tell you a whole load of new things you didn't know about Gauguin?
Yes, definitely. And Sue Prideaux, as she said in that little video, is committed to the truth. And I think that's one of the things that shines most brightly from this book, is that commitment to the truth, that commitment to not to judge Gauguin, but to simply describe him. And I think what we all agreed on as judges was that typically it's very difficult for somebody to write well about art, visual art, but Sue Prideaux writes magnificently about visual art. And it's beautifully written, it's sensuous. If you're not interested in art as well, it's still a great read because, as Pete said, it involves colonialism, revolutionary France, and a fantastic life. It's a wonderful book.
Well, let's welcome Sue Prideaux. Thank you very much to Sue. Right, just one left before we find out who has won. And this last one is Revolusi, and it's by David van Reybrouck.
No waves, no billows, no breakers. The calm Java sea splits the moonlight into 1,000 oyster-white shards that bob gently on the dark water. From the distance comes a faint thrumming, barely audible at first, but the sound intensifies, coming closer, now a distinct throbbing, an ever louder pounding, until it turns into a forceful, regular thumping, and in the moonlight, the unmistakable form of a steamship surges into view, a majestic white colossus parting the waters with her ramrod prow. Well, the Indonesian Revolution is one of these events that is mostly seen as a national event, important for the Indonesians, painful for the Dutch because they lost their colony, but it's really seen as something that was strictly national. But it was the first country that declared its independence after World War II, only 2 days after the Japanese capitulation, and it set in motion the entire decolonization movement of the 40s, 50s, and 60s, and it's an event of world importance comparable to the French Revolution or the Russian Revolution. We tend to believe that revolutions in the Northern Hemisphere are world history, and the ones in the Southern Hemisphere are local history. I tend to disagree with that. I hope that people, after reading Revolusi, will come to the conclusion about our shared humanity. The decolonization movement was one of the biggest events of the 20th century, especially in the middle of that century, and it really changed the world. And I think the common humanity that underlies the longing for freedom, the longing for self-rule, is so important that I hope people come away with that. And a second idea is that colonialism is not only something of the past.
I think what David van Reybrouck does successfully in this book is he emphasizes the humanity of Indonesian people themselves. It's very much an organic book. With a lot of history books, they tend to be quite conceptual and quite top-down, but with the impeccable scholarship, the interviews, the emphasis on Indonesian people telling their own stories, I think what this beautifully written and engaging book does is it places the humanity squarely on the perspective of Indonesian people themselves, rather through the perspective of outsiders.
Isabel, what did it mean for you? I mean, the subtitle, the birth of the modern world, I mean, it really does open one's eyes to so much more.
It does. When I first saw that subtitle, I thought, really? And actually, it doesn't take long into the book to understand what he means by that. And what he means is, you know, the end of one era and the birth of another, which essentially kind of crystallizes in Bandung with the non-aligned movement. We are seeing another moment for, as it were, that non-aligned movement, which is now defining choices that can be made in the world. It's defining what can be done, what can be said. It's rearranging our global politics. And it goes back to this extraordinary moment, and Indonesia, which is actually a huge and important country, which is very little written about. This, universe that he conjures up, because this is vast, it's extremely diverse, it's a very, very complicated story, and you live it with him in a way that is he takes you into another world in that magical way that good writers do. It's absolutely magisterial.
Well, David is currently on a cargo ship somewhere on the high seas.
Why not?
But we are fortunate enough to have another 2 Davids with us. They are his translators, David Colmer and David Mackay. Thank you very much, and thank you both, Davids. Well, it's time now for me to hand over to your chair of the judges, Isabel Hilton.
Thank you. Well, gosh, feels like sort of, you know, either going into one's final exam or graduating. I'm not quite sure what the appropriate analogy is, but funnily enough, the question that I have been most often asked about the position that I have been privileged to hold of chair of this year's prize is how many books did you have to read? And as I said, we start off with a very large room full of a very large number of books. And as the boxes arrive at your house and they keep on arriving, it does sometimes feel like a lot of books, quite a lot. In theory, there were more than 300 books in contention, though we didn't all read, of course, 300 books. But we did read. We did a lot of reading. But actually, the real question is, what did you discover in the orgy of reading that our summers became? And I'm sure that we all felt that the one thing that we discovered is that this is the most remarkable time for non-fiction writing, and indeed non-fiction publishing. Imaginative, fearless, original, brilliant. The books that we've been reading and discussing over the past months have been all of these things and more. We're in a very disordered and anxious world. And one reason that I felt grateful to be doing this year was that these authors, these books, they're all facing and indeed helping us to face life's most difficult questions, from the end of life to the end of the world, to the place of love, the meaning of memory, how we arrive at who we are, if we ever do. And I think the phrase what it means to be human is very overworked and much abused. But if you were lucky enough, as we were, to spend time with these books and with this shortlist, I'm sure that you would also find that that very tired phrase was rejuvenated through these really outstanding works. As to the process, well, of course, selection at every stage is hard, saying goodbye to books that had become friends or favorites. But that is the job, and the difficulty is also a sign of the outstanding quality of the lists that we had to carve out of the initial 300 plus that were under consideration. So my very, very warm thanks go to my fellow judges, a more intelligent, collegiate, hardworking, and in the very best sense, argumentative bunch. It would be very hard to find. And none of this would have happened, of course, without Toby Mundy and his wonderful team, who supported us, supplied us with guidance and sandwiches at every stage. And we all of us owe a very large thank you to Baillie Gifford for their generous and frankly exemplary sponsorship of the prize. So in the times that we are living through, books, the ideas that they embody, the insights they provide, the debates they provoke, this is not a second-order luxury. They sit at the heart of our society. They challenge us, they stimulate us, they console us, they guide us in these very uncertain days. So my last thank you, and the most important one, is to the authors, the men and women who embark on the difficult and often lonely road to hardcovers, for the way that they enlarge our understanding, they stimulate our thinking, they speak to our hearts, and they enrich our lives. And we believe that this year's shortlist showcases the absolute best, and we're very, very grateful to all these authors. And now, it is my great pleasure to announce that the 2024 Baillie Gifford Prize for Non-Fiction goes to Richard Flanagan, question 7. There's another envelope. It's not you. It's not me. Where is Clara? Here she is. Wonderful. I think you have one of those. And I think we should all be in you. Congratulations, it's fantastic. Thank you. Yes, I hope you will. Yes. How will the news get to the Tasmanian rainforest? Oh no, we have
I think we have
a
something
video.
on screen.
But if you'd like to say a few words before we have the video.
Rainforest, in fact. So we're not sure yet how we're going to get this news to him, but in the event of this happy, happy occasion, we did ask him to say something, which was a hard thing to make him do before he set out. So I think there is something to watch.
Forgive me for not being with you tonight in London. I'm far away on the 6th day of a walk in the Tasmanian wilderness, off-grid and uncontactable. And so a week ago, the quixotic task fell to me of recording this message of gratitude for a prize, which I won't know until tomorrow if I've won, or as is rather more likely, lost. I wish first to thank the judges both for according me this prize, and also for their great and unsung labour in judging this award. The shortlist they settled upon is an exemplary list of wonderful books. I am grateful to be awarded this prize, but I was honoured to be named in the company of the other 5 shortlisted writers. I thank too the sponsors, Baillie Gifford, for so generously supporting this prize and for all that they do and have done for literature. At a time of great duress for writers, Baillie Gifford's sponsorship matters because it helps keep alive not just this prize, but literature in this country. And I thank them for that larger gift to us all. Yet, my soul would be troubled if I did not say that the very rainforests and heathlands in which I am camped tonight, unique in the world, are existentially threatened by the climate crisis. And were I not to speak of the terrifying impact fossil fuels are having on my island home, that same vanishing world that spurred me to write question 7, I would be untrue to the spirit of my book. So, becoming the beneficiary of Baillie Gifford's generosity, it behoves me to give something in return to Baillie Gifford, something perhaps more valuable than money, a perspective that may otherwise be absent from their executive discussions. The world is complex, these matters difficult. None of us are clean. All of us are complicit. Major booksellers that sell my books are owned by oil companies. Major publishers that publish my friends are owned by fascists and authoritarians. No one tonight should regard my words as criticism of Baillie Gifford, but its opposite. It is belief in Baillie Gifford's good faith and the seeking of a way forward. When we stumble, when we weary, it sometimes helps to have a friend to urge us on to our destination. I would welcome an opportunity to speak with Baillie Gifford's board, both to thank them for their generosity and also to describe how fossil fuels are destroying my country. How, as each of us is guilty, each of us too bears a responsibility to act. A writer, a fund manager. I would urge Baillie Gifford to act on its own publicly stated conviction that it sees no future in hydrocarbons by sharing with the public a plan to reduce its already minimal direct investment in fossil fuel extraction and increase its investments in renewables. In accepting this prize, and the prize money that goes with it, I have a small caveat. I will delay taking receipt of the money until the day that plan is announced. And on that day I will be grateful, not only for this generous gift, but for the knowledge that by coming together in good faith, with respect and goodwill, it remains possible yet to make this world better. Question 7 is about hope, how we must seize the day if we are to live. I thank you for the prize and the great honour that goes with it in the same spirit. Thank you.
So, congratulations once again to Richard Flanagan, and I should point out that he's pulled off a most extraordinary double, because he's the only person, I think, ever to have won the Baillie Gifford Non-Fiction Prize and previously to have won the Booker Prize, and I think that's an extraordinary achievement. And watching his video from Deepest Tasmania, I'm bound to reflect that last year's winner, John Valiant, was also the author of a fierce polemic on climate change. Afterwards, he developed a respectful and productive dialogue with Baillie Gifford, and I'm sure that Richard will too. Now, as I said at the beginning, we're here to champion the free exchange of ideas. Baillie Gifford is championing them with us. And the board of this prize is proud to have them as our sponsors this evening, and for as long as they are willing to support the prize. And Peter Singlehurst, you heard what he said before dinner. Thank you for what you said before dinner. And your colleagues, you've got several Baillie Gifford colleagues here tonight. You're very welcome. It's lovely to see you here. So thank you to everybody who's had part in this splendid celebration of great non-fiction books. Thanks to my colleagues here on the stage. And once again, thanks for the extraordinary job of judging all those books. I should at this point say good night, but it's not quite good night, because you're all warmly invited to the after party. In the Gothic bar, you don't have to dress as goths, by the way, unless you want to, but in the Gothic bar of the St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel, and that goes on till 12:30. And as you may know, all you have to do when you come out of BMA headquarters is turn right, walk up to the Marylebone Road, turn right again, and you will get to the St. Pancras Renaissance Hotel. Thank you, everybody who's been involved this evening. Thank all of you. I do thank you for coming, and good night. Thank you.